you were creating all of this. The whole Air Miles program was really the vanguard. It was the first, right? It was before Aeroplan had shifted into a loyalty.
Totally.
It was still a frequent flyer program,
Just frequent
right?
flyer, yes.
So you launched a whole new system, a whole new perspective, like your story with the Shell CEO. So how did you do that? How did you create this whole new business system that created value for people?
Well, it's a funny story because, in fact, the first instance of Air Miles, so multi-company loyalty program, coalition, was in the UK. And it was the brainchild of a guy called Keith Mills, who's now a knighted guy and whatever. But Keith, it was much like the original Canadian Tire money in Canada. It was literally a physical currency in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, and so you would collect this thing from all these different retailers, and then you would put it in an envelope and send it in when you booked your airline ticket, and that's how you paid for your ticket.
Wow.
The problem in Canada is that's illegal. So, if you're a retailer, you can hand it out if it comes back to you, but if it's going to a third party, that's actually illegal. It's called the Trading Stamp Act. And so we had to find a way around that to launch the business in Canada. And the way we did it was by creating a digital currency versus a paper currency. And that got around the law because they never thought about it being digital. Right. So that launched the collector card. That created de facto the database. And there's a few of us around the business. So that was materially just to get the business idea off the ground. But there were, and sort of secure that we're going to democratize frequent flyer travel and blah, 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 blah. So I think the unique element, though, was that there were a few of us around the business who had been exposed to the direct marketing industry. And we kind of looked and said, wait a second, you're missing the thread here. The real value that's being created in this business is this database of information.
Exactly.
Right? And the ability for us to understand who's shopping where. And why are you going to this gas station, and when there's a partner grocer across the street, you're not actually frequenting that grocery store. And so we started to mine and create, creative ways that we could communicate to the consumer using their information, but at the same time creating value around this core construct, which was Air Miles. And that was kind of the core ethos that carried us for many, many years. It was this value exchange. You sign up for the program, we're tracking for your behavior, which I think consumers got to understand relatively quickly. We're trying not to be creepy about it, but we're trying to do this in light of being able to expose you or provide opportunities for you to collect more currency faster, which allows you to get to your desired goal, whatever that may be.
So it was no longer a tracking of transactions. It was actually a two-way exchange of information and value.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to shift gears for a second because in developing the book, The Brand-Driven CEO, we interviewed a whole range of CEOs around the world, different sectors. And we really wanted to know, as the CEO, what do you focus on to lead a brand?
Yep.
And they all started with what you said. Well, I stay out of the way of the marketers. That's the marketing department. I'm leading something bigger.
Yes.
And without getting into the detail, we outline it in the book as the new 4 Ps of brand management that these CEOs focused on. Go back, if you can, in your memory, when you were creating everything you just outlined for us, what were you focused on?
I was focused on driving to a purpose, basically, right? And our purpose evolved from the democratization of air travel, frequent flyer travel, if you want, evolved over time because we had different value propositions. We recognized there were some people who kind of went, I don't want a holiday, I don't need to go on a holiday, but I really need help buying my groceries or getting gas for free.
Right.
Or I want to go to the movies. That's a reward for myself. And so we evolved to this, which was about rewarding Canadians every day. And the nature of that was, it's everyday spend, and it's an ability for you to get something extra for things that you would be doing anyways. You're going to buy groceries, you're going to buy gas, you're going to go to the department store, buy clothes. And so, that was the center of the purpose. And I actually managed the business with a very simple ring. And under the theme of R&D stands for rip off and duplicate, I'll give credit to a Sainsbury's CEO who showed the ring at a retail conference, and I looked at it and went, That's brilliant because it's such a simple way to structure what's really quite complex, right? So you start with a purpose, and then you think about, okay, how are we going to show up for that? So that the first thing is people. The first thing comes is people. It's saying culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right.
There's an element of truth to that, especially these days where you can have the best strategy, but that's not necessarily what's going to win, right? It's the execution of that strategy and how you bring it to life every day in everything you do and everything you're building over multiple horizons.
Especially when you're in a service industry like you were.
Completely,
right?
completely.
Yeah.
So the next ring is the values of the organization. It's basically about culture. And it's, what do we stand for? Who are we? How do we show up for each other and for our clients and for the purpose of the organization? And then after that is the key strategic pillars of the business. Mm-hmm. What are the big things that we're trying to do? They were never more than 5. Most of the time, there were 3 in the business.
And prioritized, I'm sure.
That's why there were 3. And then around that, on each one, it almost looked like a Trivial Pursuit piece, were the segments of pie, as you used to call them. And basically, it was what are the big operational levers or initiatives that are supporting that strategic endeavor. And I would stand up in front of the company, and I'll tell you a fun story just about that. I stand up in front of the company and present this and basically say, if you're in this company and you can't point to one of those, penultimate pieces that are there and say, my work is contributing to that, you need to go have a conversation with your manager. Mm. That's how important and how central it was.
So I don't want to interrupt your story. We're going to get back to that.
Yeah.
But I love where you've gone with this. But a question that I get asked often, you just talked about purpose, vision, the values of the organization. And a lot of people say, yeah, but that's all the soft, kind of easy stuff that, put it on a plaque and put it in the lobby and there. But I'm hearing you say, no, that's what you were focused on.
Completely.
So what made it, aside from the logic that you can now point to, what made it that important for the CEO of this huge new organization to focus on?
Because of that aspect of people. I think your 4 Ps are people, intellectual property, processes, and partnerships. Our business foundationally was focused on partnerships. So, we kind of checked that box really easily, and it was part of our DNA, right? As a coalition, you're dependent on those ancillary relationships, those deep business relationships you have with other companies.
Right.
And so it was very easy for us to expand from that into, in an IT environment, how would we do that a little bit differently? Or how would we approach that in a different way? Right. So that was ingrained in our DNA. I think what's interesting about the Ps is, yes, on the IP part and process, those are mission critical. But if you don't have the people, kind of neither of those things come to life.
Right.
And so, recognizing that that you want to have an environment which is attractive for qualified and highly attractive grads or prospects to come into, building culture, making sure. I don't know if you ever went to our last office, but it was completely structured to deliver on an experience. Right. That was the LoyaltyOne brand coming to life.
Collaboration.
Teamwork, flexibility, the ability for people to team up very, very freely, open communication. Right. Everything about the physical environment was to reflect and reinforce things about our branded experience from a work experience standpoint. So it was. I did spend a lot of time. I spent a lot of time with my chief people officer looking at what we did to hire and attract, what we did with respect to culture, how we reinforce those messages all the time in communications, in town halls, in our performance management system. It touched everything, right. Right down to we literally worked with a company to build our peer-to-peer recognition system. We had it used to be that the managers all held a little kitty, and when somebody did a great job, they gave them a gift card to go have dinner at the keg or whatever. Right. And we looked at that and said, we're kind of about democratizing rewards. So why don't we do that systematically?
Exactly.
So we took all that budget that was sort of through the organization, and we gave everybody the ability to recognize people with miles. Dave, thanks for helping me on that project. I put 10 miles in your account. It wasn't even about the monetary value. It was about the recognition. And that got posted to a Facebook-like feed, which was part of our intranet.
Well, and two things. I mean, let's, again, go back to the importance of people for sure. But you were building a whole new sector, not just a company, but so defining what are those right competencies?
Correct.
What is the right structure?
Yeah.
Well, there was nothing to look at as an example. You were kind of creating it.
Yeah.
So I can understand as a result why it would be a priority for the CEO. But as you watched it evolve, did it remain one of your priorities?
Always was my priority. The people part, always my priority. I think I spent my time probably a third. A third of it was on people, culture, our hiring, who came into the company. I interviewed everybody from director level up. Didn't matter if they were 2 levels below me in the organization.
Wow.
Our senior leadership team needed to have a consistency to it on how they showed up, and that they foundationally shared the values, espoused the values, exhibited the values, and were good fits for the organization.